Okay, so today we are going down a very interesting path with this one. Uh, this is the mysterious disappearance of Michael Rockefeller in 1961. And we have a whole bunch of sources here that you've provided.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to really dig into this case and try to figure out what we know and what we don't know about what happened to him.
Yeah, this case is really interesting, I think in part because it's more than just a missing persons case, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole element of ambition and the allure of the unknown and this clash of cultures. It's fascinating.
Right, exactly. And so to get everyone on the same page, who was Michael Rockefeller? Well, obviously he's part of the super wealthy Rockefeller family, son of Nelson Rockefeller, who later became vice president. But, and this is key for our story, he was also a serious collector of tribal art and had a fascination with the cultures of Papua New Guinea, specifically the Asmat people.
Yeah, and his expedition wasn't just a casual trip, you know? Your sources really emphasize that he had a specific mission, which was to collect these important pieces of Asmat art and to document their way of life for the Museum of Primitive Art in New York. Now, it's worth noting that at the time, that museum was specifically focused on non-Western art, especially tribal artifacts. So his ambition, this drive to connect with a culture so different from his own, I think it really sets the scene for the drama that's about to unfold.
It really does highlight that there's a huge cultural difference there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And even the place where he disappeared is just as intriguing. November 1961, off the coast of Papua New Guinea, near Asmat territory. And what initially happened seems almost ordinary. He was with a Dutch anthropologist, Rene Wassing, and they were traveling by canoe on the Belém River when their boat flipped over because of rough waters. It's crazy to think that such a simple boating accident could turn into this huge, unsolved mystery that people are still talking about today.
You're right. It really does show how unpredictable exploration can be and how things can change in an instant, especially in such a remote and challenging place like that.
So let's dive into that fateful trip a bit more. The sources you provided say that the canoe capsized on November 17th. Can you picture it? The rough waves clinging to that overturned canoe and drifting further away from the shore with every passing moment. The fear and confusion must have been overwhelming.
Absolutely. I can only imagine. And they were stuck out there for almost 2 full days. Think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
The constant exposure to the elements, the uncertainty, and the hope slowly fading as the chance of rescue dwindled. It's a pretty bleak picture.
And then, on November 19th, Rockefeller made a very critical decision. He thought they were too far off the normal shipping routes, so he decided to try and swim for help. That's a 12-mile swim to shore. His last words, according to reports, were, "I think I can make it." Knowing how this story ends, those words are both hopeful and really sad. That one sentence, looking back, holds so much hope but also so much tragedy, don't you think?
It's powerful, isn't it? It shows his determination, maybe even desperation. He must have understood how incredibly difficult it would be to swim that far, but he felt like he had to try. And what's striking is that Rene Wassing was eventually rescued, which makes Rockefeller's complete disappearance even more mysterious. They faced the same ordeal, but one was found and the other just vanished after deciding to head for land.
Yeah, it makes the whole situation even more confusing, right? After he disappeared, a massive search operation was launched, as you'd expect. The Dutch government, the U.S. military, and the Rockefeller family all dedicated a lot of resources to finding him throughout November and December of 1961. The scale of the search alone tells you how important it was to find him.
It was a massive undertaking, and yet, based on the sources you've given me, it's clear. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no trace of Michael Rockefeller. And considering how much effort they put into the search, it's really incredible that they didn't find any physical evidence at all. He was officially declared dead on December 19th, but without any proof, it just fueled more speculation about what happened to him.
And that, of course, brings us to the theories. When there are no clear facts, people start to come up with explanations to fill the gaps. It's important to remember, and your sources point this out too, that without solid evidence, these are just possibilities, interpretations of what might have happened. But they're compelling, and they really show how humans try to make sense of things they don't understand.
Exactly. When there's no definitive answer, people naturally come up with different explanations, some more plausible than others based on what we do know. It's like trying to solve a mystery, but without all the pieces of the puzzle. You have to try and put together a story with what you have.
So let's start with the official explanation: drowning. Back then, most people believed that Rockefeller simply got too tired and drowned before he could make it to shore. And when you look at the details, it's definitely a reasonable possibility. The rough water, those strong currents, the physical exhaustion of swimming 12 miles after days at sea. It's incredibly challenging. Plus, there were no reports from locals of anyone seeing him alive.
Those are all really important points that make the drowning theory very possible. It can't be overstated how physically demanding a swim like that would be, especially in those conditions. But, as your sources also mention, the question still remains. If he drowned near the shore, why didn't they find his body? That lack of physical evidence is the main reason why so many people don't fully accept this explanation. It makes you wonder if there could be other explanations.
Which leads us to the most talked about and definitely the most disturbing theory, that he was killed and maybe even cannibalized by the Asmat tribe. To understand this theory, we need to know a little about the Asmat people. They were known for headhunting and cannibalism, and importantly, they believed in revenge.
This historical context is crucial for understanding this theory. Your sources emphasize that just a few years earlier, in 1958, a Dutch patrol had killed several Asmat warriors. This event could have been a strong motive for the Asmat to see any outsider, especially a white man arriving on their shores, as someone they needed to take revenge on or use for ritual purposes.
And the evidence supporting this, while not as conclusive as a body would be, is still pretty convincing to a lot of people. Your sources talk about a journalist in 1969 who claimed to have gathered first-hand accounts from Asmat villagers. They described Rockefeller being killed and eaten. While these kinds of oral accounts can change over time and be interpreted differently, the fact that these stories exist and persist definitely adds a disturbing layer to this theory.
You always have to be careful with such accounts. Oral histories are important, but their accuracy can be affected by different things. However, we can't just ignore the fact that these stories emerged and circulated within the Asmat community. On the other hand, your sources mention that the Dutch government consistently denied any credible evidence of cannibalism connected to Rockefeller's disappearance.
Then there's another possibility, a bit less gruesome but still unproven, that he actually made it to shore and was either captured or maybe even became part of the tribe in some way. This idea suggests that they didn't immediately attack him when he arrived.
The evidence supporting this theory in your sources is mostly anecdotal, like stories from tourists in the 1970s who said they saw a white man living in an Asmat village. There's also a sort of romanticized idea that maybe Rockefeller, because he was so interested in their culture, decided to stay with them and embrace a completely different life.
I can see how that would be a captivating image, right? This
Right.
idea of him finding a new life in a completely different world. But, like your sources highlight, the biggest problem with this theory is that there's no real proof. No photographs, no trustworthy eyewitnesses, no physical evidence to support the claims that he was living among the Asmat.
Exactly. These reports haven't been verified, and they could simply be misunderstandings or just speculation. Without tangible proof, it's just a theory.
Lastly, we have the conspiracy theory, that the Dutch government deliberately hid what really happened to Rockefeller to avoid an international scandal or something similar.
Your sources suggest that there might be documents or information indicating that Dutch officials knew more than they admitted publicly. This kind of theory often pops up in high-profile disappearance cases when the official explanations don't seem to add up.
But, as with every theory, there are arguments against it. One of the strongest, as your sources mention, is if there was a cover-up, why would the incredibly powerful Rockefeller family, with all their money and influence, stay quiet if they knew the truth? It doesn't seem likely that they would just accept the official story if they suspected foul play or a government conspiracy, does it?
You're absolutely right. The fact that the Rockefellers didn't publicly challenge the official story or launch their own independent investigation does make the idea of a big conspiracy less believable.
So, taking everything into account, what do you think are the most likely scenarios based on the information you've seen?
Looking at all the information you've provided, I'd say the two most plausible explanations, even though there are still a lot of unknowns, are either that he accidentally drowned because of exhaustion and the strong currents, or that he reached the shore and was killed by the Asmat. If he did make it to land, revenge for the Dutch killings or some kind of ritualistic killing based on their culture and history seem like the most likely reasons.
And is there any chance of finding new evidence after all this time? It feels like a really cold case.
Well, if he died at sea, the chances of finding any remains now after so many decades are pretty much zero. The ocean is vast and decomposition would have taken its course. If, as some stories suggest, he was killed and they disposed of his body according to Asmat customs, then it's unlikely we'll find anything now. But there's a very, very slim chance that if he was killed and buried in a more traditional way, new forensic technology like ground-penetrating radar might be able to uncover something. It's a long shot, though.
It's amazing how this story continues to fascinate people even after so many years. Why do you think people are still so intrigued by it?
There are a few reasons. First, there's the inherent drama of this wealthy, privileged young man going to a remote, culturally different part of the world and then just disappearing. It taps into our fascination with exploration and the unknown. And as we discussed earlier, the idea of a lost outsider encountering a hidden tribe is a story that has been told and romanticized many times in Western culture. But in the end, I think it's the unsolved mystery that really keeps people hooked. We don't have a definite answer, so we keep speculating, creating different stories, and wondering what really happened.
So as we can see from the sources you shared with us, Michael Rockefeller's disappearance is more than just a historical event. It's a captivating story that makes us think about exploration, cultural clashes, and how powerful the unknown can be.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? It makes you realize how little we know sometimes and how complicated it can be when different cultures come into contact, especially in a time when exploration was changing our understanding of the world.
Think about it this way. Even with huge search efforts and decades of speculation, we still don't know the truth. What does that tell us about the limits of our knowledge when faced with a world so vast and complex, and especially when trying to understand the beliefs and motivations of people in its most remote corners?
That's a deep question. It makes you really think about how we learn about history and how difficult it is to fully grasp events that happened outside our own experiences and culture.
Thanks for bringing us these sources and for taking this really fascinating deep dive with us into the mystery of Michael Rockefeller. Until next time.